was June 1993 and our direct flight from Manchester landed safely in Orlando for our 2-week stay in Florida. The first week we had planned to do the theme parks, Disney World, SeaWorld, Universal Studios and the Florida Wildlife Park, with an evening visit to downtown Orlando to sample Church Street Station, Rosie O'Grady's and the like. We collected our Toyota hire car and set off for the Catalina Inn in Kissimmee. After checking in, we were ready for bed and our trip to Disney World the following day. Disney World did not disappoint us, with rides on It's a Small World, the daily Main Street Parade, the riverboat ride, Captain Nemo's submarine Nautilus, which actually takes you underwater. Looking through today's rides, it's no longer there. I suppose it's because the original film starring James Mason as Captain Nemo and Kirk Douglas as his protagonist has long since passed into history. Then finally, for the day, the thrills of Thunder Mountain Railway. That evening, still pumped with adrenaline, we visited Churchtown Station in downtown Orlando, watched the line dancing, wined and dined in Rosie O'Grady's, and finally watched the night train pull through the station, which seemed to go on forever. The following day was to be a visit to the marathon attraction SeaWorld. Arriving in SeaWorld early, we took in the first Shamu, the killer whale show of the day, which I had seen on a previous trip but was anxious to see again. Making sure we didn't sit too close to avoid the drenching Shamu imparts to the unwary who sit near the large glass screen. The show we saw still allowed the trainers to be in the water with the killer whales and was very spectacular. However, I believe nowadays, after the tragic killing by Shamu of one of the trainers, they aren't allowed in the water. I've watched the latest show on YouTube, and unfortunately it isn't the same anymore. Following Shamu, we made our way to the Clyde and Seymour show, which features clowns, a seal and a giant walrus. Budweiser, the famous beer company, had an exhibition, so we called in the tent for a cooling beer and a snack. Suitably refreshed, we strolled across to the lake area where we took our seats for the Hawaiian-themed water ski show, which I had seen before on my first Florida trip, located in Cypress Gardens. This show is very spectacular and skillful.
Everybody's in the lake, and don't you know, it's a beautiful
The next day was our trip to the newly opened theme park Universal Studios, which had opened 3 years ago in 1990. After strolling through the familiar film sets,
Mr. Blue Sky, please tell us why you had to hide away for so long. Where did we go wrong? Sky, please tell us why you had to hide away for so long. Where did we go wrong? Hey there, Mr. Blue, it's a place to be with you. Look around, see what you do.
we took in the Jaws ride, which is a great frightener. I believe it closed about 4 years ago. Next was the Blues Brothers show, King Kong, the New York Overhead Railway, and the Alfred Hitchcock Psycho show. Finally ending at the Rough, Tough, the Good, the Bad and the Ugly Cowboy show.
Why you had to hide away for so long? Where did we go wrong? Hey there, Mr. Blue Sky, so pleased to be with you.
Next day we drove out of town to the Florida Wildlife Experience, a massive area in the hills above Orlando, where we toured around the various animal enclosures which simulated the Serengeti Plain in Africa, but with fences. The tour was by an open train, which made it easy to take in the sights and smells. The highlight of this theme park was the petting area for the giraffes, where we were allowed to feed them. Then back to our noisy hotel, which unfortunately had a freeway construction site facing our bedroom. After a day resting up, we drove south to our final destination, Key West, stopping off at Fort Lauderdale, my favourite place in Florida. Where we stayed overnight in the octagonally shaped High Q Hotel. You can't go to Fort Lauderdale without a trip on the Jungle Queen, the simulated Mississippi riverboat which goes through the network of intercoastal waterways, taking in the millionaires' mansions, the mega yachts, and depending on what time of day you tour, and for those who've done it, asking Mr. Johnson to open that railway bridge. You either cruise to the Jungle Island with crocodile wrestling by day, or the evening cruise, which takes in a different island for an old-time vaudeville show and a meal of giant shrimp, ribs and chicken. We went to the evening cruise. That ended our first week. As we drove off to Key West for our second week's holiday, which is the subject of another show. Why not ask the projectionist if you aren't too exhausted?